tried bringing the walls down here, Christopher. We're called into this space and time by a self-described anarchist Quaker with a prayer to soothe anxiety. Take a deep breath with me. Hello, sweet one. I see how much you care about the world, about your communities, about all of us surviving plagues and capitalism and a world on fire. That clench in your throat, that knot in your gut, the tightness in your breath. This is how our bodies try to hold the world's anguish. We write the wrongness into our bodies, a beautiful and devastating lament. Just because your body can hold all the tragedy, the panic, the tension that it is holding right now, that doesn't mean you must go on holding it all forever. The loving grandmother in you knows this to be true. Set it down somewhere nearby so you can pick it up again when you need to. But just for a moment, relinquish your illusions of control. Allow yourself to see the many-headed truth monster. It might not be okay. It might end in flames and death and horror no matter what you do. Take a moment to acknowledge how awful and sad that truth is, and how not even the worst possible scenario would take away from your inherent worthiness. Simultaneously, it is true that human beings have always fought for one another, cared for one another fiercely, and carried the world's anguish in our bodies. And there are small truths, like that we cannot control the future, no matter how much we wish we could. Don't worry when truths contradict one another. Real truths often do, no matter what. Whether it turns out okay in the end or not, you carry the divine within you. You are enough, not because of the things you do, but because of who you are, fundamentally, intrinsically, always and without exception. Take a breath or two to allow yourself to know this.
Good morning. It is good to be with you this morning on this June 18th, the day before Juneteenth. It is also Father's Day. So we come into this space holding multitudes, holding multiple truths, and grateful to be with one another. My name is Reverend Christopher Rowe. I serve as the senior minister here at Fountain Street Church alongside a wonderful staff, including my colleague, Reverend Jody Betten. And we have a wonderful guest with us today. Dr. Keli Christopher is here with us, helping us lift up the truths, the many multiple truths that are observed on this Juneteenth weekend. Juneteenth is, of course, a celebration that holds multiple truths. It is a celebration of Black liberation and freedom of enslavement, while also holding the truths that the folks who found out about their freedom found out years after they were constitutionally free. And we know the pursuit of justice in our nation and in our world is like that. We know that it is not a guaranteed right or an inherent thing that will happen automatically. We've seen that in LGBTQ justice and in gender and women's justice and in women's reproductive justice. We have seen that in all things, racial justice, economic justice. And so today we hold all of those multiple truths as we gather in celebration of the divine that moves within and among us. It is good to be with you. We are in our last Sunday in this wonderful space we share, and so of course the crowd's thin and it becomes harder to connect with one another, but in a moment you will be invited to turn to one another and greet one another in the peace of love. And if you are at home with us, which I suspect this is one of those Sundays where there may be more of you there than here, you are also part of this beloved community and this hour of worship we share with one another. Will you please take this moment to affirm that love and that belovedness and turn to one another in that sign of love. We'll be called back with our first hymn.
The Reverend Marcine Rienstra imagines God as female, a weaver. Hear what the contemporary spirit has to say to us today in the poem, God Sits Weeping. God sits weeping. The beautiful creation tapestry she wove with such joy is mutilated, torn into shreds, reduced to rags, its beauty fragmented by force. God sits weeping, but look, she's gathering up the threads to weave something new. She gathers the rags of hard work, attempts at advocacy, initiatives for peace, protests against injustice, all the seemingly little and weak words and deeds offered sacrificially, in hope, in faith, in love. And look, she's weaving them all with golden threads of jubilation into a new tapestry, a creation richer, more beautiful than the old one was. God sits weaving patiently, persistently, with a smile that radiates like a rainbow on her tear-streamed face. And she invites us not only to keep offering her the shreds and rags of our suffering and our work, but even more, to take our place beside her at the Jubilee loom and weave with her the tapestry of a new creation. Our second reading is words penned by former civil rights activist and representative from Georgia to the Congress of the United States of America, a giant in the movement, John Lewis. from across that bridge. All our work, all our struggle, all our days add up to one purpose: to reconcile ourselves to the truth and finally accept once and for all that we are one people, one family, the human family, that we are all emanations of one divine source, and that source is love. Our struggle to affirm the light despite oppression, depression, conflict, poverty, hunger, disease, violence, and brutality is a loving gift we give to ourselves and one another to help humanity move toward the day when we can readily separate the light from the darkness and the equal incandescent beauty of the light that is in us all. You are a light. You are the light. Never let anyone, any person, or any force dampen, dim, or diminish your light. Study the paths of others to make your way easier and more abundant. Lean toward the whispers of your own heart. Discover the universal truth and follow its dictates. Know that the truth always leads to love and the perpetuation of peace. Its products are never bitterness and strife. Clothe yourself in the work of love, in the revolutionary work of nonviolent resistance against evil. Anchor the eternity of love in your own soul and embed this planet with its goodness. Release the need to hate, to harbor division, and the enticement of revenge. Release all bitterness. Hold only love, only peace in your heart. Knowing that the battle of good to overcome evil is already won. Choose confrontation wisely. But when it is your time, don't be afraid to stand up. Speak up and speak out against injustice. And if you follow your own truth to peace and the affirmation of love, if you shine like a beacon for all to see, then the poetry of all the dreamers and philosophers is yours to manifest in a nation, in a world community, and a beloved community that is finally at peace with itself. Our centering hymn is Guide My Feet, number 348 in your hymnal in the seat in front of you.
lot of the children that we work with, you know, these children usually do not have perhaps the economic advantages that some children might have. And so it is a challenge.
There's a lot of potentials. We see the potentials here that our students have. They just don't have the opportunities. Dr. Keli, you know, in her younger years, she attended Dickinson Academy. And so now she's, you know, successful, and she's, you know, coming back to the community to give back and to support the community that, you know, supported her.
We can really change generations by providing skills and educational opportunities for kids. Just having the math and science help that they need to go where they want to go in life.
Back. Oh. Right underneath.
Our goal is to prepare children of color for careers in science, technology, engineering, and math. We do that mostly through fun, hands-on math and science activities, games, you know, with budget cuts, and then just a lack of teachers. There's a teacher shortage. Our students are not getting as many hands-on opportunities as they want. You know, that's why I started this. I was an engineer, and I was always the only black person. Sometimes I was the only woman, and I didn't want to see that for my children.
I don't have to be here, but I need to be here because I'm willing to step in the gap to allow these kids to see somebody who looks like them do science and show them that it's possible to get to attain their dreams in the science fields if that's what they desire.
Yes, you can. Sometimes when we touch certain subjects, it's like, oh my goodness, this is so boring. But then at the end, the students are actually surprised because it ends up being fun, and they actually end up loving it. And to hopefully get them to get interested in the STEM field so we can see more of us out here.
I want them to have access to a STEM career. They can only get that if they have a high quality math and science education. And so really what we're trying to do is promote equity in educational opportunities for kids.
It takes the whole village, and that includes parents, the staff that's here, the district, but also the community, right? Especially underfunded schools like Dickinson Academy. And so we're so excited, you know, to have that program here. It's just been a huge blessing for us.
When we are so concerned with our own kids and what resources our kids have, we have to be just as concerned with these children because they're the future. And like I said, we need them. So I'm hoping that more people will value what these kids offer. Yeah, because they can do great things.
Well, good morning. I'm Dr. Keli Christopher, and I am the founder and chief executive officer of the STEM Greenhouse. You just saw a video that was produced by Sony. They came to Grand Rapids to feature STEM Greenhouse. There were only 10 grassroots nonprofit organizations in the nation that Sony selected for a specific grant. And Grand Rapids, most of the winners were in New York City, Los Angeles, Chicago, but then, boop, Grand Rapids got one of the awards as well. We're very proud of that. And if you're interested in seeing more, because Sony donated over $50,000 worth of video equipment to us, because we had the reason we won the award was because we had such an amazing YouTube channel. So if you want to check out my YouTube channel, it's just my name. You can check it out later. So today I'm so happy to celebrate Juneteenth with you. I am really here to just give you a little bit of information, give you some background on me. As I prepared for today, I realized, wow, this is really quite an amazing story, and I think it's something that you will enjoy. Well, I just thought I'd let you know a little bit about myself. I was born and raised in Grand Rapids, Michigan. I met some others who here earlier today that went to Ottawa Hills High School. That's where I went to high school. But I started out at Dickinson, the same school that was featured in the video. And when I was a child, even though I ended up becoming an engineer, I was not a real fan of math, okay? I was a good student. I came from a family of educators, but when I got to 3rd grade and they started doing the multiplication tables, I was never one of those kids who could quickly rattle off math facts, and so I assumed that I just was not good in math. I gave up on it when I was 8 years old. But then I got to middle school, and I had a counselor. I saw, you know, when you get your schedule, I saw that I had honors math. I thought, well, this must be a mistake. I went to my counselor. I said, you know, I know I'm an honors English student, but I don't want to take this honors math. And she said, well, you know, your test scores weren't so bad. Why don't you just try it out and see what happens? And I'm thinking, you know, I'm 12 or 13 years old. I'm terrified. So I actually go home, I'm crying because I'm in honors math. I tell my mom, I cannot take this honors math class. My mom calls the counselor. The counselor says, let her try it for a semester. If she doesn't like it, we'll take her out the next semester. Well, so now I'm stuck. I'm stuck in this honors math class with all the smart kids, and what I realize is that, okay, I guess I'm gonna have to try. You know, and I don't think before that I understood, but I really had never given math 100% effort. And also math was changing. I was starting to learn algebra. And so it wasn't so much about how quickly you could rattle off your multiplication tables. You had to think some, and I actually started liking math. I became an excellent math student. In fact, that became my favorite class. And I often tell that to my students because so many of them are afraid of math and hate math. But if I could turn around and have my worst subject become my best subject, I know that they can too. Well, after middle school, and at this point I'm a good math student, I'm a good student overall in general, but maybe I'm not an excellent student. And I go to my high school orientation at Ottawa Hills High School, and Sidney Bailey was the principal. I remember going to the orientation with my dad, and the principal comes up and he introduces us to 2 seniors in the class who have 4.0 GPAs, perfect straight A's. Now, I didn't even know that was a thing. Like, you could get all A's in every class, but there was a black male and a black female student who he introduced us to who had the highest grades in the school. And that was very powerful, seeing someone that looked like me. And in fact, I kind of knew their families that had gotten straight A's. And so that day, I was sitting along the aisle and with my dad, and the principal gave us our schedules, and he told us, I want you to set a goal with your parent for what your grade you're going to get in every class. And so I'm looking, you know, at my schedule with my dad, and the principal just started to, while we were doing that activity, he was going to the back, and he walked down the aisle, and it just so happened as he walked past me, our eyes met, and he pointed at me. He said, straight A's, right? And I thought, at that time I had never gotten straight A's, but I thought, well, maybe I'll try this whole straight A thing. Long story short, that gentleman, Mr. Bailey, he was very supportive of me my entire high school career. He started introducing me to historically black colleges and universities. I went on a black college tour where I was introduced to North Carolina A&T State University. They produce more black engineers than any other school in the world. I ended up going to North Carolina A&T State University, majoring in agricultural and biosystems engineering. Thank you. Well, then I go to the University of Illinois. The University of Illinois had never had a black person get a PhD in agricultural engineering there. When I say black, I'm not saying African American. No black person from anywhere in the world had ever gotten a PhD in agricultural engineering. So when I graduated from there, I became the first black person to get a PhD there. And then I became the 3rd black woman in the world to get a PhD in agricultural engineering. Now this, yeah, thank you. But this means I'm often in spaces where I am the only black person, or I am one of the only black people. I remember one time going to this farm, and there were, you know, a dozen cows kind of out in the field, and we were going to design something for this farmer, and I was working for the government, the USDA, and it just seemed like the cows were staring at me. And I thought, are these cows staring at me because I'm black? So I was with a group of about 3 or 4 people. I said, well, you know, I'm gonna separate myself from the group to see if the cows keep staring at me. So I take a few steps over, all the cows took few steps over. I said, okay, well, I had work to do. We started doing our work. And while we were taking measurements and everything, those cows went and told the other cows back in the barn that there was a black person out there. So all the cows, I mean hundreds of cows, over 100 cows came out to stare at me, and cows can't jump, but the ones in the back were stretching their necks like, I wanna see, you know. The farmer was so embarrassed, but I don't blame the cows. I mean, they don't watch television, they never left that field, so that was probably the highlight of their life. I also remember one time when I was working for the USDA, the Natural Resources Conservation Service, and I was the engineer on the project, and there was a black man who was the soil scientist on the project, and there was a white man who was the district conservationist. We are approaching this farmer, and as we're walking up to him, he starts kind of chuckling to himself, and he smacks his knee, and when he sees us, he said, 2 colors in a white man. I never thought I'd live to see the day. But he looked at me and said, you know what? It's okay though, because if you work hard, you can be just as good as a white man. I know, that was a compliment to him, you know? But the reality is, most people do believe that African Americans especially are inferior, even African Americans, sadly. When I went to the University of Illinois, I did not put my race or my gender on my application. I got in fact, I had a fellowship from the National Science Foundation, strictly a merit-based fellowship, and I could have gone to any school in the world. But when I went to the University of Illinois, I was treated as if I didn't belong there, that somehow I had schemed my way in. Even black people would assume that I was a part of some minority fellowship or some diversity initiative. Most people just couldn't wrap their minds around a black female student being able to outperform the top white male and top Asian male students in the world, because the University of Illinois is one of the top engineering schools in the world. So I have found that in my experience, every class I go to, I had to prove that I belong there. That gets exhausting. I remember even, you know, I've held 4 national offices in various professional organizations. I've been the national president of Alpha Epsilon Honor Society for Agricultural Engineers. But when I look back, one of the reasons I always strive for excellence was because I was always trying to prove that I belonged there, because everyone treated me like I didn't deserve to be there. I met my husband in college at North Carolina A&T, and he went to graduate school with me. But we did settle in Grand Rapids. I have 2 children. My daughter Avery is here today. She's going to high school. My son he's a basketball player for Christian High School, and I had to drop him off at Grand Valley this morning because he's playing with the team there. But when they were little, or even before Avery was born, and I was working as an engineer, I would hear about STEM programming happening in the community, in the world, and I often thought to myself, you know, I don't think that is really going to be helpful, especially for children of color. Because oftentimes the people who create programming, even for children of color, STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, either they're a white person or they are a person in education, maybe a person of color in education that doesn't understand the rigors of an engineering degree. So I thought, well, you know what, I think I could do a better job. And I started doing STEM programming for children, spent a lot of time in East Grand Rapids, Forest Hills, those communities that could afford programming for their children, but I didn't want to do that. That wasn't why I quit my job as an engineer. So I remember I had this one experience where I was working, I met once a week for 4 weeks for a summer program for girls at Gerald R. Ford Middle School in inner city Grand Rapids. And I was working with middle school girls going into 7th, 8th, some even going into the 9th grade. We were playing a math game, and the girls, I saw girls struggling. This is a very basic math game, like a 3rd grade level math game. I saw a girl struggling. I walked up to her and I said, you know what? I think if you use division, you'll get the answer you need. And she said, Dr. Christopher, can you remind me, what is division? This was not long division. This was like 8 divided by 4. But she didn't understand the concept of division and she was going to high school. And at that point, I realized that our educational system was way worse than I had imagined. Right now, in Kent County, only 5% of Black 11th graders are proficient in math. Only 5% of Black 11th graders are proficient in math. And it's not a problem of the Grand Rapids Public Schools. No school district is doing a good job educating Black children in math. It's an emergency situation. So anyway, at that point, I decided to start STEM Greenhouse, a nonprofit organization, because I would go to schools to try to help, and they never had any money to get it done. And the reason it's called STEM Greenhouse, the reason I call it that, you know, the Bible in Matthew talks about, I can't remember the chapter, but in the book of Matthew, I believe chapter 13, there's a parable of the sower. And the farmer is casting seeds. Some land on rocky places, and some don't have soil. Some get choked out by other plants. And then there's the good soil. And so my idea was, what if our community was able to provide the best possible environment for children of color to learn math and science? What would that look like? And that's what STEM Greenhouse, that's what I was thinking of when I created STEM Greenhouse. Well, I started STEM Greenhouse in 2014. That's almost a decade ago. But believe me, it was hard because I didn't have a lot of resources. If you ever started a nonprofit organization, you might know this. It's very difficult to get started. And I didn't have a lot of money. I was often like substitute teaching, doing other jobs, doing other STEM programming for other organizations. And about 5 years ago, I remember I was doing some work for another organization, and I came home from work. It was a Saturday, and my husband had gotten some routine blood work done that day. And so when I got home, he had gotten a call from his doctor that he had to go to the emergency room. Well, to make a long story short, the next day he was diagnosed with leukemia, and he died on the Friday of that week. And so at this point, I was a widow, and I had 2 children, and I didn't really have an income from STEM Greenhouse, but I wasn't destitute. I was fortunate that we had life insurance. Now, it wouldn't last forever, you know, if I didn't have any income, but I decided to take a risk and continue with STEM Greenhouse because that was my dream, and my husband always supported that. So if we could go to the slides, let's go to the next slide. I want to introduce you to STEM Greenhouse, the nonprofit organization that I founded. So STEM Greenhouse was founded in 2014. The purpose was to build relationships with underrepresented students in and around the Grand Rapids area. So this is a picture, my daughter is in that picture, from our STEM Academy that we host in the summertime. Next slide. So the original program that I started was STEM Scholars. It's an after-school program for middle school students. And in this program, I realized that I was mostly teaching science and doing math remediation. And the schools that I'm in, the middle schools that I'm in, they don't have science teachers. The students are not proficient in math and science, but partially that is because they don't have science teachers to teach them. So I started that program in 2017, and research from the Johnson Center of Philanthropy, they measured all of the students who were in STEM programs around the community, and they found out that my program was the only program that increased student test scores in math. In fact, students in the program have 4 times more growth in math than students in other programs. It was the only program that increased student interest in STEM careers. It was the only program that increased student interest in taking higher level math and science classes in high school. So in 2021, during the pandemic, I started the Sankofa STEM Academy. This year, the academy is at Aquinas and at GRCC. It has expanded. It now serves about 120 students in 5th grade through 12th grade. But the average student in that program, when we first got started, their math proficiency in math computations increased 2 grade levels in just 5 weeks. Then I started the SAGE program. That's an acronym for Sustainable Agriculture, Gardening, and Ecology. And that program, we teach science in the schools during the school day to all the 6th, 7th, and 8th graders at 3 middle schools. These students do not have science teachers. What the school district has is a video subscription, and the students watch videos for science, but there's nobody that can answer a question for you if you have a question. They don't get any access to experiments, to microscopes, to laboratory equipment, to dissections, all of those normal science activities that our children, and perhaps we got to experience, these students do not get to experience. So we teach science for a semester in these schools, reaching over 250 students. Then we have Kids Count. We were finding that our students in middle school were so behind in math that we wanted to have an elementary program. So that is an elementary program that serves 2 schools. And then STEM Scholars 2.0 is our new high school program. It's at Innovation Central High School. And Innovation Central High School has a STEM academy, but they have not had a math teacher, well, not a math teacher, they have not had a chemistry teacher nor a physics teacher all year. So our programming in that school during the school day is very critically important, and we have staff that are at the school all day to try to make sure those students get access to better math and science education. Now, I say all these wonderful accomplishments, but I'll let you know that up until January of this year, I was the only full-time employee for STEM Greenhouse. Now I have 3 full-time staff members. Last year, we had 56 donors. I don't know how STEM Greenhouse exists with the level of support that we get from the community. But that's one of the reasons why I'm here, because we want more people to know about the good work that STEM Greenhouse is doing. Next slide. I had a really interesting story that I wanted to tell you. One thing I've learned in this journey is that you can do everything humanly possible, but at some point, God really has to step in and do the things that you cannot do. You can plant seeds, but God is responsible for the growth. And I'm a perfectionist. I would love if every child I came in contact with just flourished, but I can only do so much. I really have to allow God to do what he can only do. And one of the things that I think really shows that is an example about my family's history. My great-great-great-grandfather was a slave owner in Tennessee, and he had a daughter with one of the slaves. Her name was Caroline, but they called her Kate. And even though it was illegal to teach slaves to read, he did not believe that any of his children should be illiterate. So he had his wife teach his daughter, his slave daughter, how to read. Well, slavery ended when she was a teenager, and she was automatically one of the most educated black people in her community. She served on a lot of boards. She taught a lot of people how to read. One of the people that she taught how to read was my great-great-grandfather. So they get married. They decide that they want all of their daughters to go to college and they want all their sons to learn a trade. I don't know why they didn't think they wanted their sons to go to college, but maybe they had just been in slavery, so it just seemed like maybe too big of a goal. But there was only one problem, which was there were no high schools for black people in their community. So my great-great-grandfather mobilized a community of slaves, people who had just been enslaved, to build a high school in their community. It became the first high school for black people in Memphis, Tennessee. Their children, all their daughters went to college. One of their daughters went to Howard University, which is a historically black college in Washington, D.C. She went to graduate school in Columbia. She became the principal of the largest high school in Baltimore, Maryland. Then my grandmother was a teacher. She moved from Tennessee with my grandfather. My grandfather and grandmother met in college. And for a black person in my generation, it's unusual to have grandparents that met in college. But my grandfather's grandfather had been a teacher as well. They came here, they moved to Grand Rapids. She started teaching at Henry School. And unfortunately, she passed away pretty young. She was only 43 years old. She had 7 children. And one of those, my mom and a lot of her children became educators. One of her children, my Aunt Ruth Jones, was the principal of Henry School, and she was like a legendary educator in our community. Then there's me. You know, I had the benefit of having all these wonderful educators as my support system growing up. But I think this is a story that exemplifies that we may never know how when we invest, when we sow into someone's life, how that will make a difference in generations to come. Could I get the next slide? In the middle of this picture is my great-great-grandmother, Caroline, and to the right is her husband, Frederick Johnson, who started the high school. They're surrounded by their daughters, their grandchildren, and then this is a historical marker outside of the high school. So I love looking at this picture because these two people, my great-great-grandmother, my great-great-grandfather, they were born slaves, but when you look at this picture, you don't see slaves. Slavery was a condition. They were enslaved, but they were not slaves, and you can tell it just by looking at them. They did not have the mindset of a slave. You know, my great-great-great-grandfather, who was a slave owner, he was an imperfect man, but he made one decision to invest in his granddaughter. But look who gets blessed by that. All of Memphis was blessed because of his decision. Grand Rapids got blessed because of his decision. You know, when we sow into children, we will be dead and gone, okay? The growth, the blessing just is gonna continue to be multiplied. We will not live to see all of the wonderful things that transpire because of our investment in young people. Could you go to the last slide, please? Now, this is the high school to this day, okay? My great-great-grandfather did not build this building. He started the school. I think it's important to note that God is responsible for the growth. Our job is to sow the seed. God does the multiplying. God does the growth, and this school still stands to this day because of someone who planted a seed, who invested in children in their community. God does the multiplying. God gets the glory. And that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Christopher, for sharing that inspiring story, for sharing of yourself so generously with us. Our seeds to make this a better community have been watered today, and so we thank you for that privilege to be here with you today. The offering that we collect today will go 100% to the STEM Greenhouse Ministry of Dr. Christopher, and so we invite you to give generously so that the giant's shoulders on which Dr. Christopher stands may be honored, and that you too may be blessed in your work. Thank you so much. There are many, many ways that we bring love into this community. We imagine ourselves to be part of STEM Greenhouse now as you manifest love among the children of our community. Thank you for that. We also celebrated Pride Month yesterday at a booth at the Pride Festival. Thank you to all who represented there and to your generous gifts to make that possible. This is the end of our time, as Reverend Christopher mentioned, in this space for our summer season. We'll be meeting in the chapel area for the rest of the summer, and many of us will be sharing the gifts that we have, the ways that we benefit the community, the experiences of love that we've shared here and more broadly, and so we invite you to that chapel series for the summer. Next Sunday, Paul Arnold will be speaking, so that should be wonderful, and AC, right? So thank you for the various ways that you are loved in our community. I invite you now, as we go, to hear the closing of the anarchist Quaker's prayer. And if we have to pick up our anxiety again, let us aim for flexibility, movement, space for breath to get in and out of our rib cage, gentleness for the things we can't do, and integrity giving us the strength and resolve to turn our sometimes excruciating caring into solidarity, mutual aid, and direct action. We are each one person breathing this one breath with common divinity. We can do this together. Go in peace.